Hello and welcome to another episode of the Omnibus Podcast, where all subjects are germane. I'm Jeremy Munson, a state representative in District 23B, and we're joined again by Walter Hudson, a city councilman from Albertville. Today we're going to be talking about Columbus Day, the celebration of this week it's got the Liberals up in arms on all over the internet. We'll be discussing the Southwest airline pilots, sick out, not a sick out, and the mandates that are being imposed on their employees. We'll be talking about Action for Liberty being removed from Facebook, a great grassroots group that has a huge following, completely eliminated from Facebook. We'll get into talking about some of the supply chain impacts of what's going on, the empty shelves at all these stores. We'll talk about Congress voting to increase the credit card limit on the nation's credit card by another $500 billion. And then the new Minnesota Minnesota Management and Budget report came out today showing that the state of Minnesota is overtaxing you by 12%. Go figure. All this and more on the Omnibus Podcast, where all subjects are germane.
Everything comes to the floor in such a hyper-partisan manner.
I would argue that it's already in the Constitution.
We've overtaxed people.
People like to legislate by emotion.
It's important to address when the governor oversteps his boundaries.
I'll pull up my pocket version here.
1,000-page omnibus bills that nobody knows what's in it. So, Walter, this week we celebrate Columbus Day. At least I do. About half the country, maybe 70% of the country, celebrates Columbus Day. Several states have officially changed the holiday to Indigenous Peoples Day. Just glossing over the fact that Columbus discovered the Western world, or as we learned in school, was the first European to come here. We know that Leif Erikson came here hundreds of years prior, and we know that Asians walked over the land bridge millennia before. So we're all immigrants, but we like to just talk about Columbus. For me, the reason why I celebrate Columbus Day is because I'm a sailor, and I love the idea of sailing across the ocean. And Columbus fought against all common, all governments and business people and navigators who said that he would be sailing to his death if he sailed to the west, that there is no way to find a new trade route. And against all odds, he raised the money and sailed west, and he made it. And the rest is history. But the idea that he brought slavery to Americas is wrong. Slavery has existed in the indigenous population in America for thousands of years. And even after Columbus arrived, they continued to enslave people. They enslaved white people. So slavery has existed for millennia, and he didn't set foot in America. He didn't bring disease here himself. Europeans did, but I think the liberals need to get over it. We should be celebrating an act that Columbus did in defeating all odds to come to this country.
Yeah, I mean, you have to work really hard, and the left, of course, has, and the media and a lot of institutional concerns have worked very hard to try to ignore the significance of Christopher Columbus's achievement. It's the claim is not that he was the first human being to ever set foot upon the American soil. The claim is not that his was the only remarkable trip or the only remarkable discovery that ever occurred in the history of mankind. The claim is that the discovery of the Western Hemisphere and the Americas by Christopher Columbus marked the beginning of a transitional and transformational point in the history of Western civilization, from which we have all, not just here in the United States of America and in North and South America, but around the world, we have all benefited from what came after that. And it's been a tremendously positive and defining sequence of events that was triggered or was certainly noteworthy or marked by the discovery and the journey of Christopher Columbus. And as you say, it was something that he did it before there was an America as we know it. He was personifying the American spirit by defying the authorities of his time, both public and private, by raising money privately to fund an enterprise against all odds. That was a very high risk and potentially no reward scenario that ended up being a high reward scenario. So there are many reasons to recognize the achievement of Christopher Columbus, and this notion that, as you say, the attempt to vilify him above him. And no, nobody's making the claim that Christopher Columbus was an awesome guy who had no flaws. He was some sort of angel in history. But you really do have to ignore the context of his time, and especially ignore the characteristics of indigenous peoples of the time, to craft this narrative that Christopher Columbus was the villain in coming to the Americas. He most certainly was not.
Yeah. And I got into some conversations with some liberal constituents that were upset that I made a post about it. And, they said, well, he brought disease and slavery to America. He didn't. He didn't. I mean, the people that came here may have brought disease, but if you want to blame him for disease, then let's blame the Native American, the indigenous peoples of America who who sent tobacco and sugar around the world and caused obesity and disease for hundreds of years. I mean, it's the same thing. They're not responsible for that. There was cannibalism and slavery and a ton of other bad things that were on this continent before he arrived. But I think it's an interesting conversation to have every year on this holiday. I'm not afraid to make a post about Columbus Day, but many Republicans chose not to. I also wanted to take a minute just to remind people that it's been 580 days or whatever since the people in St. Paul tore the Christopher Columbus statue down from in front of the Capitol, and I've got a great video recapping all the press conferences about Tom Hauser asking the officials in St. Paul about this protest that was going to happen in 90 minutes. And then, oh yeah, we're going to have all the security and state patrol be out there. There was nobody out there. I think it was one state patrol officer. They tore down the statue. They interviewed the guy and he's like, yeah, we talked to the Walls administration. Well, we've got their permission. We asked if we could film them, taking him away. And I mean, it was ridiculous. It was a setup. And to this day, the statue has not been replaced.
And statues are symbols. That's the function that they serve. And the destruction of statues is a symbol. It's symbolic in its nature. And what the authorities that the people of Minnesota saw fit to elect, what they signaled, what they symbolized in their stepping aside and allowing that lawlessness and vandalism and desecration of that statue on the Capitol grounds, is that they hate what that stands for, which is the aforementioned Western civilization, modern achievement, European men in particular, everything that we have, all the while benefiting tremendously and leveraging the power of capitalism and Western thought and all the achievements that were the subsidiaries of what Columbus achieved. While enjoying all of that, they also direct their hatred towards the fount from which it all came. And what's important for us to recognize as just normal folks out here watching this happen is that same disregard for that statue and that same hatred for what it represents is also directed at you. They disregard you. They have sat by and watched as your property has been desecrated and torn down, if you live in certain areas. And they certainly would do that regardless of whether or not you live in Minneapolis. They would happily stand by and do nothing as your property was torn apart and you yourself were assaulted. This is how they feel about you. That's the message to take away from that.
Yeah. Well, there's some good news, or at least a turn of events this week on the vaccine mandate. issue where we saw Southwest Airlines pilots and staff um, basically enacting a sick out. Everybody calling in sick. Now that would be illegal and against their contracts, so they just didn't show up to work. And we saw Southwest Airlines putting out press releases talking about how they lost 1,000 flights that were grounded due to severe weather and issues with air traffic controllers. Meanwhile, no other airline had these same issues. So I don't know what level of altitude Southwest Airlines was flying in, but it was in some weird layer where there was this dense fog or cloud. I mean, it was ridiculous. You saw all these weather maps showing there's no bad weather across the country, and all these flights were grounded for severe weather. I feel sorry if you were traveling this weekend on Southwest, but for the rest of us, we were pretty gleeful in watching this happen, in watching employees take a stand, which is where I think this takes a turn. I don't think that government is a solution to, trying to enact, preventing stuff at the state level. I think just employees standing up and taking a stand is where it's going to change, and it seems like it is. Now, Texas did pass a law banning employers from mandating vaccines as a condition of employment, and Southwest Airlines is headquartered in Texas. So this is a fight that they will kind of start going through the courts, but the employees taking a stand is a much quicker response. And by Tuesday, we saw the CEO of Southwest Airlines say, I don't like this mandate from Biden. And if you're an employee of Southwest Airlines, just send in your religious exemption as soon as possible, and we'll get it filed.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to jump off from this story, in terms of both the story itself, the media's representation of it and their coverage of it, and then an analysis of what it represents in the broader culture and the broader politic. The Talking about the story itself, you have a situation here where Southwest Airlines took the route of a propaganda campaign, a thinly veiled and absurd propaganda campaign where they put out these press releases claiming that this was due to severe weather and air traffic control and this, that, and the other thing. All of which is extraordinarily transparently false. Like, it's just a blatant, completely egregious and brazen lie, which tells you, again, how they regard you. They have zero, as a company, Southwest Airlines has zero respect for you. It comes down to, they either credit you with so little intelligence that they think they could fool you with this nonsense, with this transparent falsehood, or that they have so little respect for you as a human being that they don't really care whether you believe them or not. It's this kind of almost abusive lying without the actual intent to deceive. The way that a bully would, where a bully would try to tell you something that they know that that it isn't true, but they're trying to get you to acknowledge, they're trying to get you to go along with them and pretending that the lie they're saying is true, just to make the point that they're in charge, that they get to be the ones who are forcing the issue and determining truth for you. And so that's the story component. And then you got the media's coverage, which was just copy and paste. Look, the media, especially in the era of Trump, the Washington Post changed their motto to "Democracy dies in darkness," and they were all tripping over themselves to emulate Edward R. Murrow and talking about what a noble profession it is, and how their job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and this, that, and the other thing. Well, the first thing the media did in this circumstance is they cut and paste the obvious lie from a corporate press release and didn't afflict the comfortable. They didn't question it. They didn't speak truth to power. Instead, they ran coverage. They ran air cover for the corporate lie. And again, they did so with the same degree of brazen, abusive disregard for your intellect and total disrespect for you as a human being. That signals that, like Southwest, the media either thinks you're dumb, or is just flexing its muscles and telling you to stop hitting yourself. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that that employees across the country see what the Southwest pilots are doing and emulate it. You know, those who are in a position of influence in the companies, you are essential within. You know, if you're not easily replaceable in your company, and you have the position to take the stand, take a stand. And in you know, I've received such good news from a lot of people in Minnesota that have submitted religious exemptions to their employers with very little hope of the employers accepting them, and the employers accept them. They say because they just want to check the box and, you know, fulfill their duty to, you know, implement this mandate, but with broad exceptions. And they just you fill out the form and send it in. And so many people have had their form accepted. And I've also heard from a few people that have filed the exemption and it's not been accepted. And that's frustrating. And again, I don't give out legal advice, so contact an attorney, but document everything. Make sure that you're, you know, have emails documenting all your communication with your HR department. But I hope it's symbolizes a turn. There's many cases that are going to court to challenge this mandate, but we hope that the wheels of justice in some conservative judicial districts will be moving faster than the liberal ones, which seem to be grinding to a halt.
Well, and that's another aspect of this that demands analysis and recognition is why lie? Um, and there are many reasons why Southwest and the media would lie about this, but I think one of the most important strategically for them is to suppress by maintaining the lie. It keeps us from having a full-throated and fully engaged conversation about what's actually happening, because if you acknowledge what's actually happening, then we have to talk about the fact that airline pilots are valuing their medical freedom and autonomy above their jobs. And it's very difficult to vilify and minimize and marginalize airline pilots, because there's certain characteristics that come to mind when you think about somebody who pilots one of these large commercial jetliners. Things like intelligence, competence, professionalism, rationality, cool, calm, collected, deliberate, somebody who thinks through their choices before they make them, somebody who doesn't act rashly. And those are all well-earned stereotypes, okay, regarding the type of person who becomes a commercial airline pilot. And so the fact that this is the quality of person, this is the class of people that is engaging in this direct action, devastates the media narrative that so-called vaccine hesitant, which I reject that term. It's not hesitancy, it's a decision. It's been made. I'm not hemming and hawing and wringing my hands wondering whether or not I ought to. I've made a decision. But this vaccine hesitancy, as they like to describe it, it's not a bunch of Appalachian dwelling yahoos making moonshine in their bathtubs. It's professionals, it's nurses, it's doctors, it's airline pilots, it's intelligent people, people who are in many cases are significantly smarter, if we're just looking at professional stereotypes, than a lot of the people who were lined up first to take it, right? And so it's devastating to their narrative, and that's why they won't let us talk about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That this country is a Tinder box, and the workforce is if a small group of pilots are successful in halting their employer's mandate for vaccines, that would spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
And we saw this with the nurses too. I mean, you heard reports out of New York, or you know, up in New York State, where the hospitals were not taking people because they had a shortage of workers, but they did not say it was because of nurses refusing to work because of the vaccine, which when it really was. So they're trying to keep that narrative quiet. And as you know, the same, I'm glad you mentioned nurses, because the pilots are respected people, but nurses are respected and they happen to be in the medical field. So if a nurse
Right.
doesn't take a vaccine, then it makes a lot of people question it. And as far as vaccine hesitancy, this week in Louisiana, the state put out this this notice on social media. It's like an advertisement. It says, "Do you want your record expunged? Free food and a chance to win a Visa gift card? All you have to do is register for a vaccine on Saturday,
Man.
October 9th." They were literally saying, your record may be eligible for expungement if you for misdemeanors, for felonies. Even if some of the items are not eligible, you can still, request that they be expunged. I mean, they're expunging people's felonies if they get the shot.
And this desperation to get people to take the vaccine is unto itself highly suspect. Why do you care so much? You can't tell me it's actually for my health or for yours, because as so many people have pointed out repeatedly, if the vaccine's so great and I need to take it, then it should work. And since you've taken it, then what are you afraid of? Why do you need me to take it? And if it doesn't work, the same question. Why do I need to take it if it doesn't work? Right. And so the the there's no rational justification for the level of desperation that is manifesting in their efforts to get people to take it, which raises the question, why did they really want you to take it?
Well, there is an incentive, and it's job security for politicians. Because if I'm a politician in a state that has the highest vaccination rate, then I'm not responsible for any of
Right.
the fallout, right? So as long as they're a leader in the nation on vaccine rates for if you're a county commissioner, for your county, or if you're a mayor for your town, so they have an incentive to keep jacking these rates higher. But it's obviously it's political. One of the other things I know, we probably mentioned the word vaccine, vaccine, 142 times at our show. So there's software that actually analyzes when you load a video onto YouTube. It goes through and it checks what you're saying. It isn't just printed words, or what you're typing in the description. They actually scan it almost instantly for these words, and then puts a disclaimer on it. And if you say negative things about the vaccine, um, uh, you can get flagged and have your video taken down. And you on your other show, you've had your videos taken off. You've been kind of put on pause for being on YouTube, and I've had strikes against me. The blue check mark certified official page of a state legislator on Facebook because of posts that I made months ago that were factual, that were citing the CDC, which later changed its definition of what a vaccine is. And those strikes throttle the page down. And at someday, I may come in and go to my page, and it's just not there. As what happened today or this week with Action for Liberty. Jake Duesenberg started Action for Liberty, and or he's the president of it, and they have I don't know 14,000 followers on Facebook, but they have a significant reach, and they've spent $50,000 on Facebook advertising their initiatives and building this enormous grassroots organization to engage with people, and bring criticism, fair, most of it, some of it not fair, on legislators. But they are one of the most hated organizations in the state capitol. I think only Mortensen and I are supportive of Jake and Action for Liberty, um, but they're gone now on Facebook, which means they're pretty much gone altogether. Their megaphone has been turned off.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to focus on the areas where I think we're going to agree, before shifting into areas where there might be some disagreement. But certainly, this is a huge blow to the grassroots, which really tells you all you need to know. I mean, the beneficiaries of taking Action for Liberty off of Facebook are all, again, the comfortable. This is comforting the comforted, or providing comfort to the comfortable. It's the inverse of that journalistic and some would argue philanthropic mission of providing comfort to the afflicted. These are the people who represent you and me, the everyday grassroots, normal, mom and pop folks who are just trying to make a living and raise our kids and have our property protected and live the American dream. And they speak out against institutional forces of corporate and governmental power that have so much more reach and so much more funding, and of course so much more actual physical power and capacity to do what they want. And yet here we see a small grassroots organization like Action for Liberty snuffed out, and they're not the only ones. You mentioned the other podcast that I do on a weekly basis, the Bella D'Angelo Show. We've got 2 strikes on our YouTube channel. If we get a third one, it's going to be taken down. Now, I'll be, the stunning thing about this is that it is these small little outlets. I mean, we have virtually no reach. The Bella D'Angelo Show. I don't know if Bella wants me talking about that, but it's just a fact. I mean, you can see how many subscribers we have on our YouTube channel. Next to none. You can see how many views we have in our videos. Next to none. We're an upstart, but they can't let even an upstart have a say if it goes against the zeitgeist, if it goes against the narrative. YouTube, almighty Google, from their big tech throne in California, has to step down and snuff us out. And we're at a point now. I put out a post on social media this week where I'm like, I never thought I would see the day where I would have to seriously consider whether or not I can say what I believe in public. And of course, you always have to consider the social response to things that you say. Like, you always have to consider, well, somebody might react to this in a certain way, or there might be social consequences for me saying whatever it is I'm going to say. But we're at a point now where it's literally, can I say it? Like, if I say it, will anybody be able to even hear it? That's where we're at as Americans. It's unfathomable. If you'd have told people that 20 years ago that we'd be sitting here and we'd put out a tweet or a Facebook post and not know whether or not it was going to be seen by anybody. Of course, it's absolutely stunning.
Well, and it comes down to, who's censoring who. I mean, I've long said that Facebook, Twitter, these guys can do what they want because it's a private organization, right? Jake Duesenberg is conservative. He runs Action for Liberty. He has his own Facebook page, and he wants to choose to silence people. He actually silenced me. He took me off his page. I can't even comment or like on his page, and this has been for like a month now. And it upset me because I can't engage with people when they tag me. I can't go there and comment. And so it frustrates me, but Jake censored me by taking me off the Action for Liberty page and banning me from the page. And in turn, Zuckerberg censored Jake. Now, if we had a conservative running Amazon, which owns Amazon Web Services, which might, let's say that they hosted Facebook, they could then censor Facebook by turning off Facebook. And the president of the United States seems to think he has the authority to, issue directives to Amazon Web Services to do what they want to do, right? Oh, don't let Parler back on your platform, or whatever the pressure was from DC. But ultimately, because government is involved in censoring, in directing social media to remove posts that are that spread disinformation or hate or whatever, because government is at behind everything, directing these companies to do this, then it becomes government censoring. That is a violation of the First Amendment. So just because Facebook is the instrument that is, censoring you, because it's a government directive, it is a violation of our First Amendment right. And therefore, I think what you're getting to is perhaps regulation, but something needs to happen to address this issue, because Facebook is where so much of the information is absorbed by the public, right? We don't subscribe to newspapers. We get stuff through Facebook. And we need to address this and come up with a solution that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll try not to rehash arguments that we've already had on this, and take a shot at it from a different angle. So I think there's an argument to be made that what's taking place here, like what took place with Action for Liberty and Facebook specifically, represents a type of fraud. You stated they've spent over $50,000 to build out their platform on Facebook. They did that with the rational understanding and expectation that the audience that they built was an audience that they would keep. And there was no there when they started to invest that money, there was no foreseeable way to know that you were going to get to that. It was a risk, right? That you were taking a risk, that you would get to a point where it would all be for naught. It would all just be a waste. The value would just evaporate instantly. And I think it's somewhat analogous to if, let's keep it in the realm. Well, I'll use a couple of examples, one tangible and one a little bit more relevant. So the tangible example would be like your car, right? So a dealership sells you a car, and then as part of the as part of the deal, somehow they're tracking what you do with it, where you're driving, how long you're in it, where you're going, and they decide to change their terms of service of you getting to use this car that you bought. And it's totally random and it's completely arbitrary. And they decide, well, we don't want you driving over here. We don't want you driving over there. We don't want you using it between the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 on Thursdays and, every third week of the month. And they enforce it against some people, but not others. And it's just total and complete nonsense. And they start taking people's cars away. They start repossessing cars based not upon failure to pay the loan, but on failure to adhere to these random and arbitrary and completely nonsensical terms of service. We would instantly recognize the violation of individual rights that was taking place there. That would be fraudulent and inappropriate. A more relevant example would be the phone company. And maybe we dial it back a few years to where the phones were actually wired into our houses and we were all using landlines. But similarly, if the phone company, I think going back a few years makes this point a little bit more apropos, because there were so few phone choices, right? Like you had the phone company in your area. And so if the phone company was monitoring your usage and who you were talking to and what you were talking about, they had some way of knowing what you were talking about. And they're saying, you know what? We don't want you on the phone talking to people about President Reagan or about the Cold War or about labor laws or whatever it was. And similarly, there were arbitrary terms of service changing here and there, enforced against some people and not against others. And they started shutting off people's phones based upon what they were saying or how long they were talking or whatever the case may be, not based upon their ability to pay, but based upon what people were choosing to do with that which they had already paid for. We would instantly recognize this is fraudulent. This is a violation of rights. This is wrong. There needs to be a law. Sometimes, as conservatives and libertarians, we often mock the notion of there ought to be a law. But in many cases, murder, rape, theft, arson, there ought to be a law. And I think this is one of those situations where we have to look at what is the effect of what these big tech companies are doing. And the effect is that they are intruding upon areas of people's lives where they have no business intruding. You don't get to lay claim over my thought life because I clicked agree on a account creation on a web page. That's not how. We don't have slavery in the United States of America.
Well, I mean, this could be just as simple as truth in advertising that's controlled by the Federal Trade Commission. When Facebook says they're going to have, I mean, they're allowed to have standards and say, this is what's allowed, and this is what's not allowed. But when I see so many people's pages being taken down, so being deplatformed from Facebook, and the violation that they put forward as evidence of why they were deplatformed um, is either extremely factual, it was, or or it was just something that was completely taken out of context, and that's there are so many other things that are worse on Facebook. There are literally private groups of pedophiles on Facebook, and just tons of just bad content, that's immoral, um, and wrong. But that's allowed because it's supported by lefties, and so there should be, if there's probably already an existing law. We just need an appropriate court with competent justices that understand technology and understand the impact of this, and maybe a justice has actually used Facebook to hear this case and to rule on it. You know,
I am
so
not a cat. You remember that story?
oh god,
Yeah.
that was hilarious. The Facebook, and for those who are listening, there was a judge, an attorney that was going to court over Zoom during COVID, and his assistant's kid had some kind of Facebook, or had a Zoom filter of a cat face. Oh, and so when he opened up the video, it was a cat, and so you have this recorded video. This attorney, it's like, "Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Well, you got some kind of filter. Yeah, I know. I don't know how to turn it off, but I'm here. I'm not a cat."
I'm not a cat. Yeah.
That was great. But well, hopefully we see a case come forward, and perhaps, I mean, this is really like where the IRS was, going after conservative groups or something that was clearly biased. And I put a
Still no
post out.
accountability for that, by the way, either.
Right, right, and I mean, that was directly from the government, but we needed to do something about Facebook and Twitter and in YouTube, but we need to do it thoughtfully, and that means that it doesn't need to happen, immediately, because when if there's a knee jerk reaction to this, it could go the wrong way, and we need to do this smartly. So. Um, you know, I have unfortunately not been out shopping a lot, but I've seen a lot of pictures and heard a lot of stories from people going to supermarkets and large department stores where the shelves are getting empty. And it's not just in one area or another. We see all these pictures online of thousands of container ships anchored off the coast, waiting to unload. I hear stories about I don't know, they call them longshoremen anymore, but the people that unpack the containers or that unload the ships. And of course, there's a major shortage on truckers. There's a major shortage on truck parts, and there's broken vehicles and fleets that are down because they can't get replacement parts. I mean, the supply chain is breaking down because of COVID, and perhaps even people that are hoarding, or who knows what. And there's major issues, major disruptions to our supply chain. 20, 30 years ago, when I was working I had a brief job in manufacturing and doing supply chain logistics. And we were shifting from having, 3 or 4 months of inventory to this just in time delivery of, why are we sitting on all of this, inventory of stuff when we have to pay for that, and we can be so much more nimble and just start scheduling smaller shipments and doing less than truckload deliveries of this stuff, and just working out the numbers. And the whole economy shifted to just in time delivery. Instead of having an 800,000 square foot warehouse of stuff, you could have a smaller warehouse, and just manage your inventory smartly. And that's what the entire economy did. And then one little disruption from COVID, and actually pretty massive disruption, and it sent ripples through shockwaves through the whole system. And plus, you have China out there going after our jugular, and using an opportunity to perhaps just let us bleed out. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, but Walter, you've had some thoughts on perhaps a change in what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, again, I talked earlier about how I never in my life did I think I would reach a point where I had to seriously question my ability to say what I believe in public. Similarly, there's a paradigm shift. That's kind of the theme of the conversation here, is that similarly I find myself for the first time in my life seriously considering the wisdom of what used to be called prepping. I listen to, for entertainment purposes, I used to listen to Alex Jones way back before it was cool, like way back, like 2002, 2003, before people even knew who he was. And that was kind of my first exposure to prepping. Every commercial, his business model, it was pretty clear, right? He would spit a segment scaring you half to death that the world was going to end, that the reptiles who run the Illuminati are going to eat your brain. And then he would cut to commercial and be like, get yourself some food, buy some gold, get some gun equipment, some gun training. You're like, yeah, that sounds suddenly totally rational in the context of all this other stuff he's talking about. But it was never anything that I took seriously, right? Either the content or the ads. And now here we are in 2021, after having experienced, I think above all else, government's capacity to just literally shut down everything, to just say, yeah, we're not going to do civilization now, and everybody just goes, okay, and we just stop living. That's incredibly sobering to watch that happen. But then, as you just outlined, the disruptions in the supply chain and physically seeing shelves emptier than they have been in the past, physically seeing signs everywhere you go on restaurants and gas stations and fast food places saying, sorry for the slow service, we're closing early because we don't have staff, sorry we're out of this, sorry we're out of that, you can get a hamburger but it won't have ketchup, that sort of stuff. Like, it's everywhere you go, you're seeing this stuff. And so I find myself for the first time ever thinking, man, maybe I should look at some of this freeze dried food. Maybe I ought to go down to Cabela's and check out the firearms inventory. Maybe it's time to start thinking along these lines in ways that I never would have before. Never would have occurred to me. Or if it had occurred to me, I never would have gotten to the point where I'd actually be like doing the research or getting ready to pull out my credit card. But now I am. Now I'm there. Now I'm at the point where I'm seriously looking at this stuff. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And it's a bellwether. It's like when you have rational, normal, non-conspiratorial, non-Alex Jones type people who are looking at the nooks and crannies under their stairs and saying, I could probably fit some freeze dried food in there. Like, that's that's a shift in paradigm. I don't think we've seen a paradigm like that since the Great Depression in the United States, and that generation that came immediately after, where people seriously thought about how, waste not, want not, and be prepared if something goes wrong, because they experienced it. And then we've had such plenty in the subsequent decades. And now for the first time in many of our lives, if not all of our lives, we're looking at this situation where it's like, oh, geez, it's not, we can't take it for granted that there's always going to be gas at the gas station, that there's always going to be milk at the grocery store. That is not a guarantee. We better do something about it.
Yeah, there's been a few times in my life where I used to travel a lot when I was younger, and my wife and I lived on our sailboat for a couple of years, traveling around. And when we were actually shipwrecked in the Bahamas, we had to spend a month on this island called Bimini, and they have a supply ship that comes once a week and drops off supplies. And so the grocery store is like empty for 4 or 5 days of the week, and the supply ship comes in, and then everybody goes there to like buy their stuff, and they're panicking. We spent a month down in Venezuela, and I mean, every grocery store down there is like, one brand for every item in the store, but the aisles are pretty much always empty. Back in the 80s, my family hosted a couple of Russian physicists from the USSR. And then we brought them we lived in Brainerd, so we brought them to Kmart, and they just went like berserk because there was like there's like 30 different types of this one product or, cereal or whatever. And they couldn't believe you had selection and there's no lines everywhere, and they just were amazed at capitalism. Um, but we're just ignorant growing up, going to supermarkets and seeing all of this product and choices and selection. And it was, prior to COVID, when we had the ammunition shortage, where you know, I started, I didn't ever stockpile stuff, but man, when you couldn't find 9 millimeter, ammo, if you found some, you bought it, and I did a post, because I have a Facebook page as kind of a joke when COVID started, called the Munson's government compliant, socially distant location. And there's like a bunker, and so I would tag myself when I'm doing posts from my home. And then for Christmas, I stacked my buckets of 9 millimeter ammo into a Christmas tree and posted, "This is from the bunker." But I've been thinking the same thing, like, make sure you have enough ammo and make sure figure out a supply of food. We live on a farm. We should have, we have a well. So we have a generator. We have our own water supply. And, we have a big garden. We should be canning and, or at least making sure that we have a few months of food because, when the virus came, if it was worse, if it was like halfway to Ebola, maybe you didn't want to go to the grocery store with all these people. For as much as I hated the lockdown stuff, I actually probably was more distant than most people that I know, because I can work from home in my job, and we didn't go to town very often.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing to contemplate because what once you get to that point where you're seriously considering the scenarios of like under what circumstances would I need this thing that I'm thinking about buying, the past a certain point the sky's the limit, right? Like if the supply chain broke down and you couldn't get food at the grocery store, how long is that situation going to remain in place? Probably not a short period of time. And then, even if you've got what you need, if you live in a mildly populated area and it's been a week and people haven't been able to get food at the grocery store, what kind of Walking Dead style threats are you going to start to see manifest around you? And how, past a certain point, even with your Christmas tree of 9 millimeter ammunition, is it going to be enough? Do you have enough people to use it who know how to use it? It's like the scenarios that you start working through in your head, they quickly become absurd, but at the same time, not, because it's like, yeah, if things get truly bad, then all bets are off in terms of how long they're going to be bad and how bad they're going to get. And it's a tremendous testament to our times and to our administration and to our politics and to our culture that this is where we're at, where we have to seriously consider these types of things.
Well, I'm prepared because I live out in the country and I have a generator and my own water supply and my 1,000 square foot bunker. And I'm gonna be happy and fat and
so everybody should go to Munson's, is what we're saying.
You're not welcome, man. I've got inch thick steel doors on my bunker, man. You're not coming in. So let's talk a little bit about financing for finance in this segment. Congress today's Tuesday. Congress voted to increase the credit card limit, as I said earlier, the nation's debt limit, by another $500 billion, because we just can't manage our money. And it passed using a bill entitled the, quote, Promoting Physical Activity for Americans Act, or the PPAAA, or the PA. I mean, Thomas Massey said, yeah, of course it's promoting physical activity because it's going to take decades for people to actually work this debt off.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And in the same day, the Minnesota Management and Budget came out with its last 3-month scorecard on how much money has been coming into the Department of Revenue. And we have overtaxed people. We brought in an extra like $600 and some million, about 12% more than the state was spending in its budget, which is already the largest budget in state history. I mean, just enormous. But we're still overtaxing people in this suppressed economy from through September. We just, we, I don't understand how Republicans and Democrats get together and agree to raise the revenue and increase the budget. And still, we have all this extra money. Now we just took that $657 million and threw it on the pile of billions of dollars of tax money that's just, stacked in St. Paul, way too much money. And we have this budget reserve we've had for years of billions of dollars. And I've authored a bill 2 years ago. I'm going to do the same thing when we come back from into session. It's called the Give It Back Act, and it would refund all of the extra money back, not to all Minnesotans, back to the people who pay in. So it would go back to you if you would get a portion of it if you pay in taxes. And we just need to give it back because everybody knows how to spend their own money. And if there's extra money laying around for a rainy day, it gets spent. Democrats and Republicans love to spend the money because they can spend the surplus without raising taxes. So Republicans love to do that. And of course, they call everything an investment and like it's going to just increase revenue, But we need to stop taxing people so much, and we need to give you back your money.
Yeah, I mean, if spending, I mean, it's just so, again, kind of like with the Southwest story, it's just so transparently obvious the lie underlying the entire narrative. If investing endlessly, spending money endlessly, really was beneficial, then why doesn't Walmart do it? Why does Walmart come to a city, as we've talked about before, and lobby for TIF agreements and tax deferrals so that they can not invest their money in further development of their business, if in fact that investment would be beneficial to them? And the answer, of course, is obvious. It's never beneficial to spend more money than you need to spend, ever. It's never beneficial to spend more money than you need to spend. Another analogy that comes to mind is local government, which does not have a printing press. Okay. We, as a city council member, we can't put anything on a credit card. I mean, we can have bonds, but a bond is a very highly structured and limited thing. Like you have to have a specific bond for a specific purpose for a specific amount of money. It's not like the federal government that could just say, we're just going to borrow another $500 billion because why not? And even with the constraints that local government has, where we have to physically tax the property of our residents in order to get the money before we can spend it, which provides a natural constraint and limitation, because if you spend too much, you're going to have to tax more. And if you tax too much, you're going to be out on your ass. Right.
Hopefully they'll throw you out.
That is a natural political limitation that does not exist at the federal level, because they are playing a shell game where they do I remember every time I hear a continuing resolution come along and the debate surrounding it, I chuckle, because it's like being at a carnival and listening to the barker tell you that if you hit the bowling pin with the baseball, you're going to win this giant teddy bear over here, right? Like it's such a transparent con. it's like we've been talking about continuing resolutions since 2010, and before that, that's when I started paying attention. It was 2010 Tea Party, continuing resolution, Obama. And it's just, we keep going and we keep going and we keep going. We just keep piling it on and piling it on. And which adds to the likelihood of the scenario that we were just talking about with the prepping, where it's like sooner or later, I mean, you talk about, what was it, Massey, who joked that it's going to produce physical activity because we're never going to be able to pay it off. Well, that's just it, right? The value, to the extent that there is value in the American dollar, it's rooted in the plausibility of us being able to pay it off at some point. we may have already passed the point of it being entirely implausible that we will ever pay off the debt. Ever. Ever. And at some point, that perception is going to become a reality. And when it does, game over. The dollar will be worth nothing. And you mentioned earlier, China and the threat that China poses. I was half joking around with my wife this weekend that we basically are de facto Chinese citizens already. China physically owns huge tracts of land in the United States. China owns the vast majority of our national debt. China, the only thing that could save us is China self-destructing quicker than we do. That's really where we're at, and it's a race to the bottom in terms of civilizations. Which civilization is going to be dumber faster? And we are contenders for the gold medal in that race.
I would encourage everyone listening to go out to a website that it's called the usdebtclock.org, usdebtclock.org. And it's a real-time clock that has, tons of different numbers on this page, but it shows the real national debt. It shows that, which is about $28.8 trillion, $86,000 per citizen. So every single man, woman, and child in this country owes $86,000 in debt. But we know that they're not, not everybody's going to pay anything, right? Very small. I mean, less than half the country pays taxes. So the debt per U.S. taxpayer is $228,000. Actually, $228,999. So $229,000. So if you're married, double it. That is what you owe. That's more than everyone's mortgage, than the average mortgage. That you owe in debt. For what? For what? For wars? For stupid spending? For all this pork that they hand out to grow government? And I mean, it is just ridiculous. And how long is it going to take you to pay off, $600,000 for a married couple? It's going to take you 30, 40 years. You work your whole life to pay that off.
And again, I evoke the S word.
Slaves.
Slavery. When you owe more money than you can earn in half a lifetime, you are a slave.
Yeah. And we look at the federal debt to GDP ratio, which, used to be 50, 30, somewhere between 30 and 50%. And that's a healthy debt to income ratio. When Greece hit 100%, we criticized them and said, "Oh my, you can't have 100% debt to GDP ratio. You are going bankrupt." And Greece was teetering on death. We are at 126% debt to GDP right now. We are past that. I mean, it's like in DC, they must have economists talking in their ear saying it doesn't matter anymore.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it doesn't matter. Just print it. Just print it. It doesn't matter.
There's a term. There's actually a school of thought for that. It's called modern monetary policy, and it literally redounds to it doesn't matter. Yeah. Nothing you do matters. It's total fantasy.
And a lot of it goes with the concept of $1 trillion. You talk about like, how many seconds does it take to count to 1 million? How many seconds does it take to count whatever? When you talk about $1 trillion, it's unfathomable how much $1 trillion is. And people just don't, their eyes gloss over. You have to talk in terms of what it costs per taxpayer. And when you say, well, we're going to do this transportation bill, it's going to cost everyone in America that pays taxes $1,100. So when you write your bill for the tax at the end of the year, you have to write a check for $1,100 for roads and bridges, and make everybody write that check. And then you'll see Congress get thrown out on their ass real quick.
Well, and I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that even for, because I'm sitting here looking at this usdebtclock.org right now, and even as a conservative, somebody who's familiar with the Austrian School of Economics and has followed Ron Paul and all this stuff, even for somebody like me, when I look at a number like $228,999 per taxpayer, I know I'm never going to have to pay that. I'm never going to have to pay. And even if they tried to come for it, they couldn't get it because I don't have it, right? Like they're not, it's never going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the problem, is that even when you put it down to a scale where people can comprehend it relative to their own life, it's still intangible, because until it manifests in, you can't have X, we're going to take Y away from you, you're going to lose out on A, B, and C. Until it manifests in those tangibles, people aren't going to care. They're going to see it. They're going to see it as free money.
You have a problem in Albertville trying to collect $59 a month from someone to build a school that they can touch and feel, or
Right.
you know what I mean, or to operate the school.
Right.
$60, 59.99. I mean, that's hard. But
If
to
you
try to
act
collect,
now.
yeah, if you act now, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, $600,000 per family to try to collect. Yeah, it ain't happening. Not with my Christmas tree of ammo. Uh, they're not coming. So yeah, it's tough. But at the same time, we need 36 Thomas Masseys in DC that are willing to stand up and call hypocrisy out on everybody. I mean, at the beginning of COVID, he did a roll call vote on the House floor for that, because the $4 trillion spending bill or whatever the thing was, because they wanted to do it by acclamation, just by voice vote, so it wouldn't be on the record. And he tried to force a vote to make everybody do a roll call, and they couldn't even get it done. I mean, we need accountability in DC and in St. Paul. So that's it. I wanted to do a quick shout out. We have this high school page program. For those of you who don't know, if you're a junior in high school, or you've got a kid that's a junior in high school, they can come up to the Capitol for a week and learn about state government. They stay in a hotel that's paid for, and they get to come every day and work on the House floor, learning the process. And then they do these mock committee sessions and mock floor sessions and learn about government. It's great. We need more people to do this. So if you go out to the Minnesota House of Representatives website and search for the page program, or go out to my Facebook page, I have a link to it. It's a great program, and really highly encourage you to get your kids involved in government in this way. And we need more conservative kids, because most of the pages are from the metro. And but I love to meet with them and have discussions about politics and partisan politics and crony capitalism and lobbyists and everything. So it's a great program. Please look into it. Last thing I wanted to talk about today, Walter, which we didn't cover in the opening, which I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about. There was a big, I would call it a mass shooting in St. Paul. 14 people shot, one woman died in a popular bar on 7th Street, right in St. Paul by the Xcel Energy Center. A bunch of legislators live above it. Big deal. It's going to be one of these shootings that causes a lot of Democrats to call for gun control. I've had a lot of emails already saying you need to stop. You need to get rid of handguns in St. Paul.
Well, I hope I hope if you pass that law, Democrats, you don't expect anybody in Ramsey County to enforce it, because when you pull somebody over for a traffic stop, the county attorney, John Choi, has said that he's not going to prosecute felony crimes. So you better make your gun control laws misdemeanors. There better be something that you can just write a ticket for somebody having an illegal gun, because that's the only thing that's going to get enforced in Ramsey County.
Well, they certainly are not. They're not enforcing the gun laws that we already have on the books.
Yeah, right.
This is a big deal, because people get caught with guns, they shouldn't have them, and then they get pled down to some petty thing where we should be prosecuting these people. They've caught two of the people that were involved in the shooting. Both of them have long priors, should not have had a gun, and it's already against the law. What do you want us to do? It was already against the law. And if we have some kind of national gun registry, they're not registering their guns because they're illegal. So it's not going to work. So we need to start prosecuting people that are caught with guns.
See, you need to engage your mind a little bit and do some translation of Democrat gun speak, because their objective is obviously not to stop things like what happened in St. Paul at that bar. That's not their objective. If their objective was to put an end to street crime, then they'd be supporting the police instead of calling for their defunding. They'd be looking to prosecute felony crimes and traffic stops rather than to ignore them. You wouldn't have the likes of the district attorney in Chicago having a well-documented public shooting between gang members that resulted in a death, a murder, and then deciding nobody's going to be prosecuted for it because it was quote unquote mutual combatants. Their objective obviously isn't to stop gun violence. Their objective is to come after you for your gun that you're never going to use to commit a crime against anybody. That's their objective. Once again, just like with so many other examples we've covered on this episode and previous ones, the double standard is such that you are the criminal for being a natural law-abiding citizen. And the actual thugs in the street who are burning down police stations and destroying cities and shooting each other in front of bars, they're a protected class. Like you said, these are guys with long felony records. They shouldn't even be on the street. We talk about criminal justice reform. Yeah, we need criminal justice reform in the opposite direction of what they're advocating for. Okay, we need to have criminal justice where criminals stay in prison. Perhaps in some future episode we can have a debate about the death penalty. I don't want to open that can of worms here and now, this late in the program. But we need you're not. The objective is obviously not to end this crime. And if you want further evidence of that, just look at all of the cities where Democrats are in control. They're in 100% control. And the crime is horrific because that's not their priority. Their priority is crushing you and maintaining the criminals as a constituency.
Well, certainly this shooting was horrific, and it's a tragic story. This woman being shot, but these thugs that had the guns shouldn't have had the guns, and trying to figure out a policy that is going to be effective to get these out of the hands of criminals. It's just something we all want. We don't want hardened criminals, violent criminals, to have guns, but guns are traded like currency. And the universal background check proposals or the red flag laws and everything else aren't gonna go into effect because they're not gonna work. They don't work with these people. We need there's a couple proposals I've seen for like the straw purchasers, cracking down on straw purchasers, which is going in and buying a gun for someone that is a felon and then giving them the gun. That's an issue, but what I've seen proposed is basically a crackdown on the retailers and forcing the retailers to make judgment calls for people that look like they shouldn't be, purchasing it for someone else. Well, then you get into this racial profiling and, having retail clerks that are, making minimum wage psychologically profile people. It's pretty difficult. So, well, I think that wraps up a good hour. We've covered a lot of topics. Walter, you got anything else you want to tell our listeners about that's going on this week? Or
I'm feeling pretty spent. I mean, these weeks and these discussions are becoming taxing and draining. Not that I don't enjoy them; I enjoy them a great deal. But man, there's just so much stuff going on, and it seems like one week tops the previous one, and I don't know where the limit is at this point.
We're fighting so many battles, people. There's so many things to get involved with, but we need more people to get involved. There's a couple of great gubernatorial debates that are coming out where we're going to have like all 6 candidates on a panel actually having a debate. This is where we really need to break down and hopefully see some, at least a couple people pull ahead of the pack. And I look forward to these. We're having one in Mankato at Mankato State coming, or Minnesota State University, as it's known now, is going to be coming up I think in just the early November. It is on November 6th or November 3rd, 6 p.m. Hope people down in southern Minnesota come and attend. All 6 are going to be there. The College Republicans are also hosting one at the beginning of December in the cities. I think there's going to be 5 of the candidates. Probably the 5 leading candidates are going to be there. So get involved. Find a candidate, get behind them, and help them, because we're going to need everybody to get involved to win the governor's race, which is essential if we want to change the state. We can't just win the House or the Senate. We need to also we need to have the trifecta if we're going to enact change. And of course, get involved in your local school boards and take back your schools and your city councils. So that thanks, Walter, for co-hosting another episode, and thanks everybody for tuning in to the Omnibus Podcast, where all subjects are germane.